How long ago did you start the business? What was the inspiration for the business?
We're here just over 5 years actually. We're 5 years last November.
Okay.
So we've worked for ourselves for a long time. We've worked for ourselves for 15 years actually now. And we've been in the hospitality business before, restaurants and stuff.
Okay.
And we made a bit of a life change when kids came along and wanted something a bit different. So daytime hours was more desirable than nighttime hours. But part of it was me bemoaning the lack of good coffee in villages. Moycullen's a lovely little village, but it was like just a good coffee, good shop.
Yeah.
Towards the latter end of when we were in the restaurant, we had started to like hold and host a lot of events, like community-based stuff.
Okay.
Because I was heavily involved in the business community group there. Starting to get the sense of how spaces should work within a village or within a community.
Yes.
So I knew when we did this here, we also wanted to have something that wasn't just, it's difficult to explain sometimes. People think it's just a coffee shop. It's not to me. I always think of it as a space because what we're doing is like we're stocking and supporting so many independent businesses, so many small businesses. We're often people's first stockists actually. But not just that, like over the 5 years we've been here, like you sort of, people gravitate towards the space, especially people who are like-minded and want to support something small. So like we've had lots of maker pop-ups and other stuff, but what mostly noticed is the kind of sense of community that gets built. I've seen people kind of connect and grow friendships and even like interact and like start doing business together or whatever through having met through here and stuff. So the whole idea of us to always have a space was more than just one thing.
Yeah, to be a hub in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
This is a Monday morning and there's so many people coming in to get their coffee even. And so like the coffee is that an anchor
It wouldn't
part
be.
of the business for you?
That's always been something as well for us that I always felt that it seems silly to have to say it now, but because we've seen so much of the coffee explosion in the last few years. But like back in 2018 we opened, people didn't quite get it yet. The idea of being a bit more kind of specific about how you do your workflow.
Yes.
Putting the effort in to make the coffee right and sourcing from specific suppliers. And like the first time some people saw us weighing shots and stuff, their minds were like, what are you doing? Because they were like, that's Dublin City stuff. What are you up to? Like,
Exactly. I just want like a milky tea and milky coffee.
But, like, to be honest, I always feel that people are in need of and wanted something nicer.
Yeah.
And if you give them a better product and show them that it's not just to put the product in better, but like how our roasters are people who champion environmentalism and sustainability and working with small producers and paying a fair price to farmers, that once they get to learn all this stuff that's underneath the surface, then they can appreciate much more and kind of realize that it's worth, making the choice. And it's not even a price point thing, because coffee is this funny market. It's like, I always compare it to like the gourmet burger market. I was like joking about it. It's like you can charge a crazy price and call it a gourmet burger, and you can have a regular price, but it's a very small margin window for what you can charge for a cup of coffee that people will pay. So it doesn't matter how much you work hard with the product, there's still, and especially when you're in a small village, there's still a limit to what you can charge. So we're just trying to give something a bit better, but with a bit of conscientiousness behind it about how it's produced and where it's produced from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that leads us, like, people may or may not know that you are the creator or co-founder, I suppose, of the Coffee Course, which is a huge network. Yeah. Is it only in Ireland, or is it?
It's just in Ireland, yeah.
Okay.
So what it started was just a collective of shops. We used to spend time kind of like making sippers of this, sitting down, talking, brewing coffee, and it just gave a real sense of connection and community to the shops and the locality. And it actually meant that then we actually came together as a group to start to host events like the Airpress Championship. The National Airpress Championship was the first time it was held outside of Dublin. It was brought to Galway by the group. The Brewers' Cup came to Galway that same year, and actually one of the guys in the group ended up in Cali, ended up being the Irish Brewers Champion, travelling to Greece to represent Ireland.
Wow.
And one of the things we do as part of that is we're trying to track and map the opening of, specialty shops and good shops. So, like, we'd often say people like, I'd be up in wherever, I don't know where to go. And we're like, well, here's a map. Go to these small independent shops because we know that they're good and support them. Yeah. And that's kind of what it's like. It's like, we understand that we're here in this little village in the west of Ireland, but I know of all these other little places, and I know there's all the little places I don't know about that are trying to do something similar in their own little village. And for me, someone who used to spend a lot of time on the road, I was like, if I'm in somewhere like that, that's where I want to go and spend my couple of euro. That's where I want to,
Exactly, rather than going to a chain or a Costa or a Starbucks or a petrol station.
You never know what you might see or what you might learn,
Yeah. How many shops do you have in the Coffee Course map around Ireland?
Oh, at the moment it's like about 150 something plus. Yeah. One of the difficulties at the moment, unfortunately, is that in the last 6 months, there's some places closing as fast as some places are opening. So trying to keep track of that.
Keeping it up to date.
Yeah. But we often, it's also a good excuse to go out and drink a lot of coffee.
And as you say, I mean, the community side of it is great, and that's, half the fun of it is to get to know more people who are fans of coffee just as much as you are.
And you'd be often surprised how, when you can be in a small village and you're doing something, you can feel like you're rowing your own boat, but you realise when you get out there, there's so many people who are aligned with your values, who are trying to do the same thing. You just need to find them,
Coming back to Tree Bark Store, what are your, obviously we talked a little bit about coffee, you've talked a little bit about the makers.
Yeah.
What does that look like in terms of the business? So you also, I think, have wine. Mm-hmm. Are you kind of always then every day on the lookout for new makers? Are you thinking more about the coffee? Like where is your time each day?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, especially for me. Like obviously, it's very important for us that we always have a consistent and straightforward workflow, so that. And that's one way we set up our bars, that no matter which one of our staff, who we've all spent a lot of time training, come in, that at the end, when the cup comes out to the customer, it's a solid, relatable, dependable experience that they know they're getting a cup of coffee. Like our core roasters, Calendar Coffee, are based in New Ireland now.
Okay.
They're our house coffee, and they've always been our house coffee. Because I said they do great work. They're, solid roasters.
They have a great reputation in Ireland and
huge reputation, and really well respected internationally, even but we also want to bring other Irish people through the space, so we always have an offering of a guest espresso. So we work with maybe at any time 4 or 5 other Irish roasters that will be on the shelves or maybe on the machine as well.
Okay.
And then there's also like lots of exciting international European roasters. So once in a while we'll like right now we have 2 Dutch roasters on the shelf as well as the 6 Irish ones, because once people have kind of learned to know that there's something on offer, they're always looking for something new. So you have
they want to do a taste test.
Exactly. So you have the people who come in every day and want the exact same thing, and that's what we want to offer to as part of the community. But there's also people want to try something different, something interesting.
Yes.
So we always have something interesting for the people who do want to try something different.
Cool. Very cool.
And then the other side of it is there's we call it Tree Bark Tuesday. It's you come in, the weekend's happened, you had the Monday quieting down, and then you forget about all the stuff that you ordered last week, and it all arrives on that Tuesday, and you're unboxing all this new product. You spend your day going like, why did I order all these things? But it's great, because at the moment we might have the bones of 90 plus Irish makers in the space.
Amazing.
So up to Christmas, like we run up to Christmas, we'll ramp that up. When the space gets a little bit changed, we might have 120, 130 plus, but during the year, we have over 200 different Irish businesses coming through the shop.
Incredible.
So there's a bit of work in finding them, as you mentioned. Stuff like Showcase is great. I was there last year, met lots of industry people. You get to see the product, you get to talk to people. Well, we often have people coming to us now. It's a great thing, established enough that they come to us, and an unbelievable wealth of Irish made goods out there. It's staggering how many people are making or doing something interesting.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to keep track of that as well, but that's something we're constantly working on. And we always welcome people getting in touch with us too, because no more than the coffee shop, as we were saying a few minutes ago, we don't know what little gems are out there that people are, and it's nice to be a space that supports that, because we have, as I mentioned earlier, been the first stockist for many of those people on their journey. And it's nice to see a person who's put their heart and soul into it, suddenly they can come in and stand and look at their little shelf and see their stuff. And we know the story of them all then, and then we can tell people as they come into the shop. I have a scenario where people will come up to the till and they'll have a selection of stuff, and I will say to them, I'll be like, put it down, and that's 6 independent Irish businesses you just bought from there. Tell them a little bit about, after the big huge queue, they feel even better about what they're doing, because they can actually see it right in front of them, that they've helped support so many different people,
Yeah, and I suppose that probably leads us into perfectly, if there are makers watching, Irish makers, how do they get in contact with you? What's the easiest way to reach out to you?
Hop onto Instagram is the easiest way. No more than anyone, we have a strong presence there. That's how we find a lot of people. You'd be surprised seeing other places online. Drop us an email, whatever it might be. We're very open to chat to whoever has something. Yeah.
Kind of what was one of the biggest challenges up until now with the business? and kind of what, how did you overcome it, and kind of maybe what insights or tips would you give someone about overcoming that challenge? Because a lot of businesses challenge, especially ones with physical premises like yours, is potentially a shared challenge, like a common challenge between a lot of people.
Yeah, I think really doing your homework. I mean, we could roll out the tired pony of what happened in 2020, but everyone went through that.
Yes.
And we're all hoping not to have to go through that lesson again.
Yes.
We often find people who have passion projects, be it the makers or coffee shops, it's class and we want to support that. But a lot of people don't do the grown-up part of it. The bits that people want to avoid, which is like sitting down and actually like crunching your numbers and figuring out the reality of how these things work. And it's sad to see spaces and businesses that don't work out because they have a great product or a great setup, whatever they do. But unfortunately, the reality of doing business in Ireland is that you have to be realistic with it. You have to be able to go, this is my margins, this is how I need to operate, this is what I can afford to do. Like, we didn't build this overnight. Like, everything we have here, the original version in the shop, was much smaller. So we did what we could afford to do and what we, could do at the time. And then grew it,
incrementally.
And then we pushed through into that backspace and built that. Then we extended what we offered, and then we, spent a bit more money on the bar, buying nicer machinery to make things work better. You can often be a bit crazy of like, well, this is how I want it to be, and then just trying to go there straight away, but you can't.
Yeah.
And you probably shouldn't, because honestly, getting there is where you learn all those lessons.
Yes.
I think maybe for me, it's the hospitality background, it's also the kitchen part of my brain, where whenever you work in a kitchen, you got to have a really good system. And if everyone can't work in the system and things don't work, then it doesn't work,
Especially for you as the owner, if you're not there on a certain day, you need to be able to trust that things are due.
And that's actually, you said it, you need to chase consistency, because you don't know what's happened to someone on the day they're having before they come through that door. And maybe they've built this thing up in their head that they're going to come in here and have a good experience, and you can't deliver on that. You've just disappointed in what you're supposed to be giving, I think being solid and reliable for people gives them the strong association and feeling with you, and that's a nice thing to do. It's a good thing to do, and it's easier than you think if you just put the work in at the start. I've often talked to other business owners, and I'm very straightforward, and I'll be honest with them. I'll ask them questions they don't want to be asked. And I remember talking to a man, he was like, I was chatting to him, and I was giving him a hand setting up a business, and I was like, well, what's your cost? And he goes, I haven't upside, I don't want to look at that yet. And I was like,
But you shouldn't be starting if you can't.
I was like, if you can't tell me what it costs you to make that, then stop right now before you do anything else.
Yeah.
Because if you can get all that uncomfortableness out of the way, then you can go and enjoy the experience.
Yeah. In the knowledge that I'm not losing money on every product I make or service I provide. Yeah.
And I think as well, people want to support success. So if you set yourself up for that, you can get to provide something that becomes valuable in a community. There's nothing worse than that community that has empty spaces of stuff that's open and closed, because it really drags away from the soul of the town.
Yes.
I think there's a responsibility there that if you're going to offer something, try and do it right.
Is there any other pieces of advice, anything maybe that you think any type of businesses, or obviously business in your industry, that they're underestimating and they shouldn't underestimate?
Well, in terms of support, there's actually a lot of information out there, like your local enterprise office and stuff like that. Actually have great supports and courses in place for people who are testing the waters and want to find things out. And I'd say the main piece of advice is other business owners, people who trust in your sound. Back in 2009 when we opened our first business, I was only 25, opened a 90-seater restaurant. Wow. Thinking back now, what the hell was I doing? But we got there and we learned the lessons. But the biggest thing for me was I had a friend who had been in the industry a long time before that. And early days, he sat me down and he gave me a lot of very specific, solid advice.
Yeah.
I often remember thinking about that, and I tell people how valuable that was to me, to have the comfort of knowing there was someone there who knew what they were talking about, who I could go to if there was problems.
Yes.
And the one thing he always said to me, when I remember talking to him years later, and he was like, when the time comes, I just ask you to do the same.
Yeah, that kind of cycle of mentorship.
Yeah. And I do think there's anyone who is of entrepreneurial spirit, anyone who wants to support something positive and something that can happen. I genuinely think people will be approachable if you just ask them.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't underestimate the support of that network,
Yeah.
And a governmental point of view, genuinely, local enterprise office is great. They help a lot of people start out, and And even if the government bodies, to be fair, if you can actually get a conversation with them, like they're there to provide that service. They will answer the questions.
Yeah.
I think people are scared sometimes of engaging in official channels because they're not sure what'll happen, but they're there for a reason.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. And the worst thing they'll do is not give you the value you hoped for, and,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're not paying for anything. What I like to always ask business owners, because I think you touched on it a couple of minutes ago, that you learn by doing. You don't necessarily learn in a bubble when you're planning the business. But
Yeah, yeah.
if you were starting this business all over again, is there anything you'd do differently, and what do you think you would do differently?
I guess for us, like what we started with, the version we started with here is very different than what we have right now. And some of that was by choice and some of that was by circumstance, because I was just saying something today jokingly. I was like, we opened late 2018. We had, a bit of time before things went strange in the world. And I just like one normal year, because 2019 is your first year of business. That's not a normal year. And then we went straight into all that crack.
Yeah.
I change anything? Yeah, I probably would. I don't think I realized how quickly we could scale up.
Okay.
I had the feeling that the interest and the support would be there, but I don't think I was ready for how quickly people would come on board.
Wow.
Which was great. It's a nice surprise. And I guess I would have started getting ready to push forward a bit faster, because you've probably seen the kid out in the shop and stuff, and a lot of the work we get done very specific and bespoke, and some of that took time when things were busy, and probably would have gone straight to what I wanted the version of the shop to be, rather than we did make some sort of concession originally to more sit down and coffee shop. We're like, okay, we'll start here and we'll get people there. Whereas I think if you're doing it right now, it's a different landscape. People have come on board. The idea of space is very different. If you're doing it right now, I'd probably just go straight for it.
Yeah, so not necessarily like a classic sit-down cafe, but more something like a coffee bar like you have now.
Yeah.
And a space people can walk around and then go off with their coffee.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't know if people were necessarily ready for it straight away, especially in a smaller village. But what we did then was an anomaly. But now, as we did last year, spaces like this are popping up in every village.
Yes.
So people are more on board with the idea. Probably I hired more staff sooner, so I wouldn't have to work as much. That's probably let's go back and
Okay. And let you, get some
Focus on
space
that,
to be more about strategy and
exactly.
growing it. Okay, it's very interesting. I think it's very valuable from your point of view in the market, as a hub for makers. What pieces of advice would you have for new makers or makers who want to grow? Because you have a different viewpoint, obviously, to them.
Yeah.
And I think it's very valuable for you, from your vantage point, to be able to say, do this, don't do this, aim at this, type of growth or another type of growth.
I'd say first and foremost, the biggest piece of advice for any maker is to get an external point of view. Often when people are making a product first, they're obviously in a very insular setup. They're being surrounded by people who are invested in them as a person. But I think as soon as you can get some sort of external evaluation of what you offer, but in terms of value point and the standard of the product, that could help you learn those lessons before you need to bring it to a shop or a market, whatever. And speaking of which, do the markets. There's nothing like direct feedback and interaction with people.
Yes.
To learn those lessons, We often find as well, some great makers are wonderful people, but they're also maybe not extroverts. They're not used to, and if you want to go out there and start putting your product into a shop, you're going to have to get there, and there's no better way than dealing with the public to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And for better or for worse, you're going to get feedback on
it'll make you a better person. You'll start to get more comfortable with talking about your product and describing it to people, because again, it's a classic example of they might have an amazing thing, but when you ask them to describe it to you or tell you about it, that's when they start to get a bit uncomfortable. And that's not everyone's case. Some people are great at that stuff already. And I'd circle back to what I said, it's no different than being a business owner. People start making a product and they look at it and they go, I could sell it for this price. And then they want to come to a shop and stuff. But they haven't thought about the realities of selling direct to a person versus direct to a shop, and the implications of costs and the implications of shops who have to pay VAT, so the price is different for them, and what kind of quantities they want, what kind of options they want, how fast can you deliver the product, we have to plan ahead of it sometimes because you can find amazing things and you want to place an order with someone. They're like, yeah, I'll have it in 8 weeks for you. You're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
That time lag can be tough from your point of view. If there are we're not singling out any makers, but makers who have really grown quickly, do they have any commonalities?
They probably have some sort of background that suits the nature of what they're trying to do, in so much as that maybe they've worked in a specific aspect of business, so they understand that better, or maybe they're good at design, so they've been able to put together a nice brochure catalog that they can bring to a shop.
Okay.
And then they can present them with all their information, like what they offer, what price they offer, what kind of volumes they have, as opposed to just like trying to rock up with a handful of products and going, this is this price and this is this price,
Yeah.
like.
So having that structure on their side, like a kind of a product catalog.
Because at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, everyone's busy. So
Yes.
as a business owner, like, I want to like stock as many people as I can, but I need to try and do that in as efficient and effective way as possible. So the more ready you are when you come to me, the better an experience that is for everybody. Definitely. I think the offering, the catalog, the price structure, all that in one deliverable piece of information is fantastic. Yes. Because we often try and like some of the guys have been here long enough that say when I went to showcase, I brought the staff with me. I was like, okay, I need someone else's point of view on these things, because just because I like it, it doesn't mean that this is something that's a match for our space. Yes. You know our customers as well as I do. Like, what would you think? Would people think of this? How would they feel about this?
Yes.
So that would be a big thing. Starting point of evaluation and like a proper structure for how you approach the shop.
Exactly. And I suppose maybe some worries for some makers is, if I'm going to supply to shops, I don't know if I can meet the volume requirements that they might have. Yeah. Is there any tips that you have for those makers? That I'm sure there are some makers in this shop that are probably quite low volume, maybe.
Part of it will obviously depend on the nature of what they're doing. Like for people who are doing cards and prints, that's a very deliverable product.
Yes.
But for people who are doing, say, handmade jewelry and stuff like that, that's an entirely different experience. I think very early on they need to make a decision whether, like, people initially start out and they're like, oh, you just make this and this is the style, and then I move on and make a different style, and that's fantastic. But the thing is, like, can you rationalize that process? If you're saying that every piece you make is unique in some aspect, what's deliverable between each one? How can you cross over elements of that to speed up your workflow? And being realistic too. Promising something to a space or shop or a market or whatever, and then not having it ready on time is,
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough then to keep that relationship with the shop or with the
And like with all these things, no matter how handmade a thing is, it still falls within the measure of production. And with any production-based business, you would assess how you would make things. You would assess what's the most effective way to make things. I've often have makers who come in and talk pricing, and then I'll say, like, well, how much time does it take you to make this piece? And be amazed how many people are like, I don't know.
Yeah, or they maybe they don't even want to admit, because they do put so much time into it, and it's not, as you say, they're not thinking of it as a production.
Yeah, and I understand that for some of them it's maybe something to do between other things, so they might be, well, I can't be sure because I spent this bit of time this day, but those kind of things are very measurable, they're very trackable,
Yeah.
So I think having a structure and knowing your own value is what that's about. Because there's nothing worse than, making a beautiful product and then bringing it to space and then realizing that it might not even be worth your while at the price point you can get for it.
Yeah.
But the better you get at that process, the more valuable it becomes to you, Because we want to be fair too to people and pay them something that's of value to them,
Yeah, you don't want to be paying makers who aren't making ends meet at all, even covering their costs of what they're making. Is there any other kind of little pieces of wisdom that you've picked up or that people have taught you about, the type of business you're in, or just generally about business? Is there, I think you've given some great nuggets there already, but if there's anything else that you wanted to share.
I do think as well that interaction with your end consumer, no more than being in the market as a business, is so valuable. No matter what your business is, being physically in the space and seeing people's interaction with the space. Even when you go in and you're not necessarily working there for the day, just being able to observe and seeing how people interact and being objective enough to watch how your own workflow and stuff happens in your own shop. And making little improvements to that. And even just seeing people in the shop. Like we'll often see people on the floor. I'm always curious to see their engagement with stuff and see what it is about it that appeals to them or doesn't appeal. And, like everyone has something to say if you're willing to ask them. You wouldn't know who on that floor right now might be a person who's involved in God knows what aspects that could teach you something valuable as well. They could be a maker themselves. They could be, who knows.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to engage with people and because the more connected you are to the people who are supporting your business, then the more connected you are to your business.
Yeah, exactly. And the easier it's going to be to make
those decisions.
Incremental changes. Yeah. And Jeff, thank you very much. This was a great interview, and I think it'll be great for especially for not only shop owners and cafe owners, but I think for the makers too out there
thanks very much.
Who want to grow their business and get noticed by a lot more people. So thank you very much.
Thank you.